Hello, welcome to Mandibil. We are heading into another part in the deconstruction of Keith Frankish's lecture series on illusionism. And let me just say we are going a little bit ahead, I think half a minute or a minute or so, into the next part, which the last part I think I have commented sufficiently on. And this is the next slide, so to say, where he apparently illuminates what he means by zero qualia, diet qualia, and It's just a reminder to my listener that when you have to classify something by creating 3 new categories, right? You're trying to explain something and then you create 3 new categories. That's not an explanation. That's a defragmentation that sort of triples the number of needed explanations, right? So it's like all these kinds of philosophers, they are, quote, philosophizing sort of midstream, right? They jump right into a potential long string of philosophical arguments that goes from the basic metaphysics all the way potentially to applying a moral principle, in my opinion, right? And then they jump in at step number 25, and then they create all sorts of elaborate systems and categories and weird words and say, now I have made some philosophy. That doesn't work for me, right? If there's something wrong with your car, let's say, right, maybe that's a bad analogy. You don't just say, or your car is crashed or something like that. Yeah. Well, I fixed the windscreen, the side mirror, right? Yeah, you did something and exchanged it with 4 new side mirrors and a car on top, right? And sort of see, I've done some mechanics here, right? No, it has to be the whole system you are applying. You are working from a whole system approach in order to approach a problem. You can't just see, now I'm focusing very much on this little particular aspect and I'm explaining it, and see, I've explained it, right? It has to work with all the rest of it, right? So I never buy these kinds of, I'm jumping into this particular, right? I know you can't talk about all aspects of philosophy in one sentence. I understand that, of course, right? But at least you need to have shown the world, in my opinion. If you are sort of an outspoken, publicly funded, whatever, let's call it, right? Public philosopher, you need to have a treatise on philosophy, in my opinion. You need to have made, in my opinion, all educated philosophers, they need to write a treatise on philosophy. Otherwise, they should shut the fuck up, right? Now, I know I haven't written one yet, right? So I'm using this as a sort of deconstructing in order to, find out if I might, have something I need to add to my own philosophy, right? In my opinion, that's fine. I mean, and I'm doing it live here, right? I might not do it live, but I'm doing it live, right? So I'm thinking out loud about my approaches to investigating into philosophy. And I'm reflecting on where my stance is on philosophy at the moment in all these various aspects. I have philosophies that cover all bases. My philosophy covers all bases. All bases. All bases that I need, at least, right? You could go and philosophize about, let's say, aesthetics, right? I find that to be sort of a sideline philosophy, right? Because aesthetics is something about what does it mean that something is beautiful, and what does it mean that something is art, and what does it influence on your everyday, but it's certainly not something that can end up in ethics, for instance, right? And it shouldn't, I would point out, right? It shouldn't be beauty or something like that. That is a judgment of that sort of old romantic idea, I suppose, right? that beauty is good for some reason, right? So it's like, and that's also sort of this appeal to femininity as beauty equals good or something like that. Now, I mean, if that isn't, taken advantage of, I don't know what, right? So just as a side note, right? But all the major bases are covered in my philosophy. And I'm trying to hone my philosophy into being so clear and strict and concise that I can write a book on let's say 100 pages that covers all bases, right? Why not? I mean, why do you need to spend 6 hours in a lecture series to refute qualia, right? Which you can't refute even by a mantra that scientism has to be right. I need to be able to use electrodes to find out where consciousness is, or something like that, right? And if it's foundationally flawed, it's never going to work, right? And that's what I'm trying to argue with these kinds of people, right? And I'm also arguing against people like Bernardo Castro, who's an idealist who just goes in the other direction, right? Where physicalists say that there is no mind that is interesting in this picture. Then they say, idealists say that everything is mind, right? And also mind beyond that which I have access to, and so on. And I'm going to tell you what that outside mind is, and so on. So whoa, woo, 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 right? Hang on a second, right? Take it easy now, boy. So it's like these extremes of, apparently a human desire to always explain everything, right? And they have this system, and I'm going to explain everything with my system, right? I will challenge that, right? I'm a proponent of the most important sentence you can use in philosophy. When you're doing philosophy, thinking and expressing is, I don't know, right? That's the most important sentence you can use in philosophy. It's, I don't know, right? And I don't mean know in the sentence of epistemological statement about what it means to know stuff. It's in a general, general term of the term know, in a more everyday understanding of the term know, right? I don't know. I can't tell. How would I be able to just, give you an answer on that? And in this kind of meaning, right? No, I would have to think about it. I would have to figure out how it fits with my philosophy. And if there's something foundational, I might have to change my philosophy. I don't know. I mean, maybe stay back, right? Don't force me to give you explanations for this, that, and the other, right? Think for yourself, man, right? Or woman. So, just a little intro here. Let's dive into it, right?
As a challenge, I think, for diet qualia realists. Here we have in the little diagrams there we have three experiences. An experience with zero qualia. Here that's represented by the pattern of dots, and these are just physical features that dispose the person who possesses the experience to judge that it has qualia in some stronger sense.
No, I need to hear that again.
Three experiences. An experience with zero qualia. Here that's represented by the pattern of dots.
Pattern of dots, right? These are qualia. You are representing something that isn't qualia by using qualia, right? You understand that's a contradiction. You should be able to do that, right? It's black. Yeah. You're conceptualizing at squares or lines or whatever, circles, but it's still the color black, right? That's a color. You have tried to make it not red, green, or blue by using black as if it's something that is devoid of color, right? But black is still a color, or the absence of color maybe, right? Where white is the presence of all colors at the same time, as far as I understand, light, right? So you're using colors or the qualia of, vision to explain something that you can't see with your eyes, right? And what is it? When you remove all the colors and the sounds and the tastes and so on, what is left? Right? Where does that come from? How does that enter your mind, that weird object there? Where is it? What is it? Right? How does it enter you? Right? I don't understand, but it's like, yes, he talks about it as if it's given to you. Where is it? What is it? I've never seen such a thing before, right? Apparently I can't see it, but how would I express it then? It has never entered me, right? This is far out, man, right?
And these are just physical features that dispose the person who possesses the experience to judge that it has qualia in some stronger sense. Classic qualia, maybe. And then at the bottom we have
What did he say there? Just the physical properties, something like that. How does that work? I can't have physical properties without having qualia. What are those physical properties? Isn't that a quality of the whatever you're experiencing? You can't experience an elephant without your senses, right? You can maybe conjure, if you said all your senses was invalidated or deprived of you, right? You could still maybe recall a memory of an elephant, but that's not find an actual banana in the now, right? How would I get to that experience without my qualia? I fucking don't get it, man, right? What the hell are you talking about? Fucking what? Oh, man. That people like this is in all sincerity is sitting there saying shit like this, man, right? It pisses me off, man, right? We're fucking doomed, man. Oh, man.
Experience that really does have classic qualia, okay? So it has this ineffable intrinsic quality to it. Now, physicalist realists want to say, well, experiences have something more than the merely zero qualia, and something less than classic qualia. So they have something in the middle there, okay? Now,
isn't that also a typical philosopher bullshit thing? They create 3 categories and then they can choose one of them to be in, right? So they have created a scenario where they can choose between 2 or 3 categories and then they can discuss with the other philosophers in the other categories, right? So they can both be right and wrong at the same time, right? Just like those who are sort of, there is discussing the shit, right? Fuck off, man.
What exactly is this thing in the middle, this represented by this pale pink glow? Now, the realist must say that diet qualia are something more than zero qualia, if they're to be a realist, okay? If all that diet qualia come down to are properties, physical properties that dispose us to judge that the experience that possesses them has an ineffable intrinsic feel, then that's just zero qualia, and the realist is, in fact, an illusionist who just doesn't accept the name. So the realist that disposes its possessor to judge that it has classic qualia, or perhaps some weaker form such as diet qualia, without it actually having diet qualia. That's the first one has to be a possibility. It has to be a possibility, a distinction. There has to be a possibility of having just zero qualia without having diet qualia. Diet qualia must be something.
What the fuck is he talking about, man? Oh. I'm on a fucking goose chase here, right? It's like, oh man, this is so stupid, right? I'm sort of checked out of this, right? It's very hard for me to wrap my head I understand it's fucked from the ground up, this philosophy, right? So I'm basically just going through this to get it over with, right? And it gets more and more elaborate and weird and strange and complicated with even more weird terms like diet qualia. It's like, I don't have words for it, right? It's like it's how would this be any help for you to get around in the world? It will only destroy your ability to get around because you should zero your qualia, something like that, right? You don't need the qualia. But I'm surrounded by qualia in all my waking hours, man, right? And I use it all the time. I mean, but it's so disconnected from any reality that makes any sense. God damn it, right? Ah, man.
Something more than zero qualia. So then what is an experience with merely zero qualia missing? What else would it have to have in order to count as having diet qualia? Well, obviously not the full-blown intrinsic ineffable fields, the classic qualia. So what would it be? Well, we're told that it would have to have a phenomenal character, a subjective feel, or what it is likeness. Okay, but what's that? What is that? And why doesn't that present a hard
And also this presentation of his, he's actually talking to us, having a debate on this slide, right? What would be missing? A phenomenal character of the subjective field. But what is that? And why doesn't it? He's apparently trying to convey some kind of extremely elaborate, complicated, weird kind of philosophy. And then he talks to you like you're 7 years old and need to understand how an Etch-a-Sketch works or something like that, right? It's like, what would be missing? A phenomenal character, a subjective feel of what it is likeness. But what is that? And why doesn't it present a hard problem of its own? It's like, oh man, what kind of world is this guy living in, and how stupid does he think I am, right? Fuck.
problem of its own. Why is that any less problematic and difficult to explain than classic qualia? So we can press this challenge a bit by asking this. Are diet qualia just functional features of experience, features defined by the role they play, what causes them and what effects they have? Like zero qualia. Zero qualia are defined as properties that have certain...
Stop asking questions! Give me some fucking answers! Give me a presentation that is simple and easy to understand! Stop this fucking debating with yourself for hours upon hours without getting anywhere, right? Yeah, you might be getting anywhere in a slow-mo train wreck of a philosophy. It is dysfunctional, man, right? Nobody in their right mind would even approach trying to use this as any kind of idea of how to get around in the world, man. Fuck off with this shit, man.
effects on our judgments and beliefs. Well, if so, which functional features? We're assuming that these are all experiences that have all the normal range of effects on, all psychological effects on memory and belief formation and reasoning and emotional state and all that. And we're also assuming that they all have, they all create the disposition to believe that that they all have features that dispose us to believe that they have classic qualia. They all have zero qualia. The question is whether they have something more as well. So what functional features would an experience with diet qualia have that an experience with zero qualia wouldn't? Well, it's it's very hard to see what the answer to that could be. After all, we can imagine zombies who are behaviorally identical to us and whose brains perform all the same functions without there having any qualia at all, apart from zero qualia. So what is the illusionist account, the account that speaks only of zero qualia? What is it missing out? What functions is it missing? If dyad qualia are functional features, what functions of experience is the illusionist ignoring? What does experience do that the illusionist doesn't recognize? That's a challenge. On the other hand, if dyad qualia are not functional features, if they are something like intrinsic features, like classic qualia, then how on earth can we explain them? So we can put this as a dilemma for physicalist realists. If they can only explain our phenomenal judgments and our other reactions, then they're just closet illusionists. If they can only explain things that can equally well be explained by in terms of zero qualia, then they're realists in name only. On the other hand, if physicalist realists say that dyad qualia are not functional features, then how are they going to explain them? We'd actively explain a phenomenon by characterizing it in functional terms and then identifying the mechanisms that perform that function. But if dyad qualia can't be characterized in functional terms, then we can't apply that strategy. So it looks as if there's going to be an explanatory gap there. The realist can say, they might say that these features just are physical features. They're not something, they're not add-ons to the physical picture.
So what I'm hearing is some kind of weirdo, nerdy, ridiculously convoluted, complicated philosophy, which is basically an attempt to not refute qualia, but just call them illusion. They are not so important that in a classic sense, but you can't live without them completely, right? They will eventually create some kind of dyad qualia that is just there for the show, but ignore them. They're not important. You shouldn't put any significance to it. Just try to live with it. And Keith Frankish is going to argue in this extremely ridiculous fashion that yes, they are not real qualia, but there's something there, but just ignore it, right? I mean, I can't understand how the hell does he get from A to B without opening his eyes and have some live qualia, right? I mean, I don't understand how he cannot see this contradiction. It's incredible how stupid these people can be, man, right? It's so
but we can't explain how they come about. We can't give the kind of reductive explanation of them that we can give of other physical features. So there's
and I might have mentioned this before. Even if he's able to somehow argue well, let's say, I don't think so, right? But that qualia is an illusion, right? In the sense that they are not important. You shouldn't take them seriously, something like that, right? Otherwise, what the hell is he doing, right? Then he wouldn't have refused the hard problem, which is the ultimate goal, I would say, right? Then what has he actually done, right? He hasn't done groundbreaking metaphysics, in my opinion, right? There are still things left. All these experiences with zero qualia, apparently, or potentially, with dyad qualia, he's ignoring. So he's basically only using experiences with zero qualia in order to get to the real stuff, right? So what is this? What is this foundational metaphysics explaining or taking care of this experience? We are not illuminated to that, right? We are not being told about that. It's only these shiny balls, the shininess shouldn't be taken seriously, because then we get rid of the hard problem. That's all he's doing, right? He's philosophizing in there in step 27 midstream in order to just these shiny things over there. Don't look at it. So we are circumventing the hard problem, and then I can stay in my mantra, right? My physicalist, materialist, mantra. That's all he's doing. He's not really doing much, right? And this is taking him something like 6 hours or 8 hours, whatever, how long this series is, to illuminate us on this, right? And in not in a fashion that I find in any way coherent or appealing, or there's nothing in this I like. Nothing. I can only see complicated bullshit, right? It's atrocious, man, right? It is like calling the Rings of Power from Amazon a masterpiece, right? It's like, eating a shit sandwich and say it's the best thing you ever had, right?
There's a dilemma, I think, for physicalist realists. If they say that diet qualia are just functional features, then I think their realism collapses into illusionism, because illusionists can happily admit that all those functional features exist. If they say they're not functional features, then they have to accept that there's an explanatory gap. And so they fail to explain consciousness. So, as I say, their physicalist realism either collapses into illusionism or fails to explain consciousness. So again, I don't think that...
I remember, this about the cloud castles, or castles in the cloud, or living in the clouds as a philosopher. That's one of the things that these playwrights in old Athens blamed Socrates for, right? Maybe that was just to get at him, right, at a hominem attack, and he wasn't really that. But when you read Plato, there is at times when Socrates seems to be slightly sophistic in his nature, right? And I really sincerely hope that Socrates wasn't anything like this guy, right? Because he is completely living in his clouds, right? He's yelling from his clouds, yes, diet qualia, don't do it's like, what the fuck? Shut up, man, right? Go away. Let the wind blow this cloud away.
Physicalist realism here is an attractive position either. It either fails to solve the hard problem, fails to really answer the hard problem, or it just collapses into illusionism. I think if you look at what physicalist realists actually say, then it actually has an implicitly illusionist form. They set out to explain diet qualia, phenomenal subjective feel, what it is likeness, and so on. But what they're...
I really don't like this moral. Why is he bringing in the term moral? You don't do that in a metaphysical discussion of any kind, right? Moral? It's just a misnomer. You don't use that term, even if you mean it in a different sense than in ethics or anything like that. Don't use the term morality in a metaphysical discussion, you moron, right? You have no fucking clue what you're doing, right? You have no fucking clue what you're doing. It's a disaster, man, right? Somebody stop this guy.
What does actually explain, if they're successful, is our judgments about phenomenality, subjective feel, and so on. Why we judge that our experiences have something we call a subjective feel, or what it is likeness, an inner aspect, a subjective aspect to them. And if that is all they can explain, then I think they are, at bottom, simply illusionist theories dressed up as realist theories. Okay, so that's a summary of the argument from theoretical simplicity, from theoretical economy. The idea there is that the illusionist view offers a much simpler, more elegant view of how consciousness fits into the natural world. Consciousness itself is perfectly real. It doesn't have these, but it doesn't have these strange properties that are recalcitrant to explanation. And so we don't have to get ourselves in tangles worrying about how these properties fit in and how we can explain them. And it's worth noting that this is not a particularly new approach to thinking about consciousness. If we go back to the 1950s, when philosophers were first developing modern materialist, physicalist theories of mind, theories that forms of identity theory, which said that the mind and the brain are simply the same thing, and that mental states are simply brain states. They tended to take this view, and we look at philosophers such as Ulin Place, J.J.C. Smart, who I mentioned earlier, David Armstrong, and so on. They tended to take this hard line on phenomenal consciousness, that it simply had to be, that it was simply a fallacy to think that these phenomenal properties existed. And here's a quotation from Ulin Place. And you can see there actually a picture of Ulin's brain, which is preserved at the University of Adelaide, where he taught for some years, with the question: did this brain contain the consciousness of UT Place? That's something he wanted to. He wanted his brain to be preserved, and describing the literal. And I think that's a lesson that some later physicalists haven't taken fully on board. Okay, so that's the case for illusionism from theoretical economy, for thinking that it's a more elegant, simpler approach to God.
Also known as Occam's razor, or what? I don't know.
Consciousness. Of course, from the illusionist perspective, there is still a huge amount to explain about consciousness. We have to explain all the functions, all the immensely complex perceptual and reactive processes. And
why do you need to explain? What is this fetishism with needing to explain stuff, right? Can you explain banana? How would you explain banana? It just is, right? There's no explanation, right? It's only interesting that it's yellow because it isn't blue, or something like that, right? Or brown. But whatever color it has, that's what the color it has, right? Belong to, right? Just because a sign says down there, doesn't mean that it's the case too, right? This fetishism with I need to explain everything. You basically can't explain much, right? So stop doing that. Work on what you do with it, what you've got, right? But no philosophers want to do that. We want to stay in explanations, right? In abstractions and models and so on, right? They don't want to go out in real life and potentially have to go all the way to a moral principle or something like that, right? No. Let me stay in my clouds kind of thing, right?
Introspective processes that are involved in consciousness. What we don't have to do is to try to find a place in our picture of the world for these elusive phenomenal properties that seem so recalcitrant to explanation in normal ways. So, in a sense, this is just an extension of the argument from anomalousness earlier. If something seems so recalcitrant to explanation, so difficult to fit into the picture of the world, that's the integrated picture of the world that science is painting, and maybe the sensible thing to do is just to wonder if then the sensible thing to do is to suspect that it's not real, and concentrate on explaining why we think it's real. Okay, we'll move on now to another argument, the debunking argument. And this is an argument that has been discussed in some detail by David Chalmers in his work. Chalmers is not an illusionist, of course, but he thinks there are